Welcome to Haunt Topic Radio, the podcast for haunters by haunters. These are scary visions.
Welcome back to another episode of Haunt Topic Radio. You made it. What do you know about animatronics? Are you scared to get started with them? They look too complex and scary? Well, maybe Ed Gannon can help break things down for you. Myself, I don't do much animatronic work. If it involves something loud with an automatic trigger that I can plug in, that's about as far as I go. But I do have friends that like that stuff, so they do all that work for me. Pneumatics really not my thing. I like to look at them. I like scary loud props that make noise or bright lights that come on with a trigger, stuff like that. In this episode, we talked to Ed Gannon about animatronics. This was an intro to animatronics class. It was open to all members of the Haunters Toolbox. If you're not a member of the Haunters Toolbox, I'm going to send out an email about May 7th. So if you sign up to be a free member of the Haunters Toolbox, I will send you this video. Really good visuals. He has a lot of, Ed shared a lot of presentations, diagrams that will help along with the audio of this podcast. So go over to haunterstoolbox.com, sign up to be a Haunter member or ProHaunter, Haunt Master. Those are our paid membership side. They get it as well. But if you have a free membership, you'll get this video. I will send that out by May 7th, so make sure you're signed up by May 7th. Also, you will get an invitation to our next training. It's a closed training for Pro Haunters and Haunt Masters. And if you sign up to be a Pro Haunter or Haunt Master member, that's our paying membership at thehaunterstoolbox.com, before May 7th, you'll get an invite to join our next class about wall textures and distressing your walls. So if you're interested in making walls, different textures, burnt looks, different things with paint, you want to attend this one. That one's going to be May 14th, 7:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. But if you sign up before May 7th on our list at haunterstoolbox.com, I will send you an invite. If you do not watch the video of this podcast, there's still some cool tips that Ed shares about getting started with animatronics, the simplicity of it, how you can do whatever you want with them and be complex with them as well. All right, let's roll into it. Our master class with the one and only legendary Ed Gannon. Okay, thank you guys for joining tonight. Tonight's topic is Introduction to Animatronics. And who else better to help us understand animatronics than one and only Ed Gannon. Now, if you've been around the industry for a while, Ed has been here. I remember watching some of his videos and seeing some of the things he's been doing over the years. Ed's from Something Wicked Productions and Haunt Dawgs, and also Chambers of Terror. He's also done work at Dark Hour Haunted House and Spooky World. He's been, how long you been in the industry, Ed?
Embarrassingly long, in the industry, probably over 30 some odd years, doing haunt education for 30 of those.
So you've been teaching and doing and experimenting along the way. So tonight we want to talk about animatronics. We're going to cover electronic stuff, motors, briefly talk about pneumatics. If you have any questions about motors or pneumatics, feel free to leave those in the chat box and we'll get to your question. This is a master class for Haunters Toolbox. This is one of our free webinars. We also have other webinars for paying members. So if you guys are interested in becoming a member, we do 12 monthly sessions for paying members. And that's at haunterstoolbox.com. You can sign up to be a Pro Haunter or Haunt Master over there. And plus, it'll give you access to all of our past master classes as well. So we want to talk about animatronics tonight. Ed, what can you say? A lot of us are, I know we have home haunters out there. We have Pro Haunters out there. Some people are scared to start. Some people don't know where to start. What kind of advice do you have for us?
Let me give you a little background. So when I started in the day, it wasn't the resources you have today. So it's much easier today. But when I first started, we were doing more people activated scares and things that would become animatronics later on. Of course, now any of those things that we did by hand with a rope and pulley could easily be done with, a motor or a piston and make it a timed animatronic. So we didn't really have that option. But when I went to help design, build, and run Spooky World back in '96, back in Berlin. The first horror theme park. It was a big deal back then. We're so busy doing all this other stuff. Again, it was mostly people run stuff. We had some pneumatic stuff, but with the timing and things, it wasn't really down yet. But they did have Tom Savini's animatronic haunted house, so they had some things already in there that weren't working. So I was the tech guy, so I went in there and you know basically figured it out. So I'm sitting there and like most of you, I wasn't really scared of it per se, but I was under a bit of pressure because I had to get this thing working. And I didn't really have a lot of experience with them at the time. So I'm looking at the thing and I'm like, this was a simple mechanism as a head popper. So it was like a metal thing. VP made it and then still running today. And had a piston down here and it just popped up the scissor mech. And so on that was a fake head and it just kind of popped up over the ledge there and went back down. So it wasn't working. And being a tech guy, you always start with the power. So I checked the power first, and there was an issue there. Some mice that shoot through the wire. So I get that going. And then I'm like, well, how does it work? I didn't know what controllers were. It wasn't as easy as today where you can pick up a Flex Max, which I love these, and from Fright Props and just like do a fun show. We'll talk about that later. But and just design what you wanted to do. So I had to figure this thing out. So anyway, I had a timer thing. You had to press the button to program it, and it would make come up, and you timed how long you wanted it to work, and then it went back down. So basically, the short version is it just turned the air on and turned the air off. But at that point, I didn't know what the air valve was called, solenoid, that makes the air valve go and things like that, whatever. But I did get it to work. And from that one simple animation, thank God it was a very simple one, I basically started to teach myself the many nuances of animatronics. So I've done all kinds of things with motors prior to that. And we'll talk about a lot of that today, because if you are scared of pneumatics and you haven't really dipped your foot in that pool yet, motors are probably an easy way to go. And for most people, they make sense because it's the thing that, does this and makes something move. It's all very mechanical and it's like, you could do it with paper and see how it works. Whereas animatronics, same thing, but the magic of the piston and the pressure and getting all that down, we'll talk about that too, is a little more finesse. But so what you need for an animation is, firstly, you got to figure out if you already have one, but if you want to make one, you got to figure out what you want it to do. What is the effect? Do you want to have a ghost that comes out? Do you want something that pops up and scares somebody? Do you want to have something that's kind of creepy in the background, like a granny that's rocking in a chair? Or, you want to have all kinds of different things you could do. You're not limited by anything except your skill and budget and what you can get on Amazon, basically. So, but basically, there's a couple things you need. So you need to have the movement, right? Whatever that is. And then you need something to make it move. It used to be a guy with a rope. And then you need something to tell it to move, and that is a controller, right? Or a trigger. So for a very simple animation, which we'll go over some of those. For a really simple animation, it could be something as simple as a motion sensor that you get from Fright Props or whatever, the white ones that we've all seen, the old security ones, 12-volt ones, and they go into something that turns on either a motor or a piston, and it does a quick thing, and then it turns itself off. And then when the next person walks by and triggers that motion sensor, it does that same thing again, and then it turns itself off. So that's a very simple animation, and you can use that to tell your story. If you have a story for your pro haunt, your yard haunt, your garage, whatever. And we use those for everything from small haunts, pro haunts, escape rooms, all kinds of stuff, even store displays. So there's no limit to that.
I think Scarlet badges are one of the smartest things I've seen in the industry in a really long time. Scarlet badges are basically either pins or embroidered patches, kind of like merit badges, as they are, somewhat named after, from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Brownies, and where after you've accomplished something, you can wear the brag tag of the embroidered patch. Some haunts put them on jackets, some put them on t-shirts, some put them on, with the pins, I've seen them put them on lanyards. But the neat thing about them is they are very specific in what they are rewarding. And they're haunt-based images that reflect what's being rewarded. It's retention, it is bringing people back, and it's actually giving your haunters, your haunt performers, the ability to share that they are haunt performers. And, oh really, you're a scare actor, where do you do that? And then they will insert the name of your haunt right there. So it's also marketing. I've always been a big fan of Scarrett badges. I think they're great. So check them out, scarrettbadges.com. No, that is not a paid advertisement. That is just my recommendation. I think it's really cool.
ScottSwinson.com.
Well, let's roll into some videos and some photos.
Sure, bring it.
Yeah. Well, first, that is you.
That is me. Not
So
my
I
favorite
wanna-
picture, but that's me.
So, Something Wicked Productions, Haunt Dawgs, and Haunt Fix. Just tell us briefly about what those companies are before we move on. I want some people to.
Sure. So Something Wicked
check out your
Productions
stuff.
has been my umbrella company for the last 30 some odd years. Everything from writing scripts and scary stories, voiceover work, haunted attraction design, build out, tech stuff and engineer of fear, all these different things. And under that, I've got Haunt Dawgs, which I got from Alan Hops, and that's basically tools for actors. So, clacker gloves, fear fans, death whistles, stuff like that. And Haunt Fix is new this year. I've been working with haunts all across the country, from San Diego SeaWorld to Florida with their first Halloween event there, the Hollow Scream, and working for other major haunts across the country, but hasn't really been under my own banner. So if you want to, done all kinds of consulting, things like that. So if you have a haunt and you want someone to come out and take a look at it or work there for a week and get things done, you want secret door, one of my specialties that'll be pretty much invisible, so you can do a quick pop out and scare, and people are like, where did that person come from? That kind of thing. Or set up your animatronics, or all these different things. You want to retheme it, or you want to give it an upgrade, then Haunt Fix is for you. And I can come out and do all that stuff for you, and give you rates on it. And either I can tell you how to do it yourself, I can teach you how to do that stuff, or I can do it for you and bring you up to the next level without sacrificing safety or throughput, which for me is a big deal. We got to, in Salem, you got to have big throughput.
Haunt Dawgs, Something Wicked.
Right.
Ooh, what's that one?
So this is, he asked earlier, we're setting things up, what's one of the animatronics that I made that I'm most proud of? It's probably this werewolf that I made for Dark Hour Haunted House down in Plano, Texas, by Dallas, Texas. And this animatronic used pretty much everything you could do. So it had a motor, it had pneumatic pistons, it had water that squirted, and then it triggered a water cannon that shot out, I forget how many PSI, but it's basically like a 3 gallons of water that hit a plexi window that you're looking through with enough force to rattle it. So it was a big scare. So this is a werewolf. If you go to the next picture there, you see. So what the werewolf did is, it's 8 foot tall, and had this guy, and he was put together, and then the werewolf would howl, put its head back, its eyes lit up, it would rip the guy in half, and then you'd have the water pump going, and the motor made some of the things move there, and then the water piston was on its own thing. It's all controlled with a Flex Max controller, and then the werewolf would lean in the gap and lift up his head again and howl, and then it would lean back, and then the water cannon would go off, and it was in between the guy's legs there, and hit the window, and then it would put the guy back together pretty seamlessly, and then get ready for the next group that came by. So if you stood in front of the window, you got to see it go twice, and most people tried to do that. So if you get one more picture there, you can see how big it is. It's
Yeah.
pretty enormous, but that one was pretty cool. So I'm real proud of that. Well, that whole thing from scratch. It was just metal, fur, and some hands. So
It's a good job.
thank you. This is just a simple motor mounted on a board, and the arm that comes with it, I welded, but you can use wood or whatever, an extension onto that. And this little eyelet here that you see at the end of that arm, we tied a string onto, and we use this for a bunch of things. We move this all over the haunt, and I spray all my tools green, by the way, so that's what that is. But so we tied a string onto that, and there's a similar one in Salem. And it as it turns, the arm goes back and forth, and it basically pulls a string and makes a rocking chair move. So the effect is it has a back and forth motion as if you're pulling a string and letting it go. And we use that for a rocking chair. You can use it to raise and lower different things. Similarly, so that was pretty easy to do, and that's an easy beginner project. All right, this was a fun one. Is this the video? Yeah. So for the haunt next door to us, we did a black and white haunt, and the last year of it, we had this King Kong there, and that was like a little animation we did with some foam board, and then we had this was like the test of it, and I made this little plane model and had a little motor that went around, and the shadow of it made it look like the plane was flying around his head. And so it was a simple little thing, but a lot of people came out and said that was like their favorite thing.
And was that motion, or was that just kept on all night?
That just kept on all night.
Yeah.
And originally we were going to have it where it comes on. You hear like, and he's at the top of the Empire State Building, and then the light would come on, but the motor was on the whole time. So the light was on a sensor, but the motion went the whole time. So it wasn't like you saw a plane just floating and then move. You know what I mean?
Right.
See if I can move that. There we go. So this is one I just built last week, and it's an ogre door for a World of Wizardry attraction here in Salem. And this is a huge door knocker. And that shiny thing is not a light. That's a neodymium magnet that I drilled out the back of it and glued two magnets back to back. So it'll be pretty powerful. And when guests knock on the door, as a goof, and you could do this in your haunt or whatever as people walk by, because they're going to do that. You know what I mean? They're like, ooh, who's home? Who's home? And then this has a reaction. I think there's a video of the next one. So that's the back of it. So I welded that in metal, but you could make it out of wood. So that's got a knocker on it. You can hear it better. On the top there, that circle is a vibration speaker. So right here, it's very low, and I turned it up louder, and that's just sitting there against the door right there. That's the speaker. And so this is a valve right there. If you see the thing in the center, that's the air valve that lets the air through. The thing on the right there is a regulator, and that brings the pressure down to the pressure that you want. This is a very simple animatronic. It doesn't need to be super loud. If I want to be super loud, I crank that pressure up and damn near sound like it's putting a hole through the door. So we don't want to have it be that loud. So it's only on, I think, 35, 40 pound PSI. And so you'll see the thing moves kind of slow. So I thought I was going to have to put, if you look at the valve, that's the thing in between piston and the regulator there in the top middle right there. Thank you. Right there, that is that's the air valve. That lets the air through. And so when you trigger with 12 volts, it goes on and off. So I thought I was going to have to put these things at the end, their exhaust manifolds on them, and that basically lets the air out slower, and it also makes the piston go slower. So I thought I was going to have to do that with this, but I didn't. So I just put the air down. Now, if you and that's controlled obviously by a Flex Max. So that'll eventually have a light hooked up to it. It's got sound hooked up to it. And because it's a cool Flex Max, every time and I'll talk about this later, but in the software that you get free that you download from Fright Props, it's got trigger is on one trigger, and that's the knocker. And then it can go through 7 different things that it says and does. So that's really cool. And so if someone's there, they're not going to hear the exact same thing. So if you go to the next video, I think it's the front.
So
and you can hear
basically on the front side, then the knocker, the customer actually uses the knocker,
Yep.
and then that is the trigger to fire this off.
Yes.
Okay, very cool.
So you go to that next thing there, you can hear it. There you go.
The ogre door.
So sorry, it's so quiet, but believe me, it's louder in person. So that's at World of Wizardry in Salem. So that's a cool, fun, extra little thing. And you could, it doesn't take much room in the back of that. So at the old Spook World, we used to have something like that with some floating doors, and it was only in the span of the wall thing. So it was like a regular wall panel was like, what, 3.5 inches? It was like double that. And we were able to put an animatronic in there. And so we got double use out of it, where there wasn't space for an actor, but we could still have a scare.
Let me turn the volume up a little bit. Let's try it again.
And here
Sure.
is the ogre door. Got to put the sign
Is that
back
better?
on when
Yeah.
someone knocks.
Hello? Who's there? Did you bring me anything to eat? Perhaps I'll just have you. Yeah.
My goofy voice on that thing. So, but again, that's using a couple of cool things. It's using a reed sensor instead of a motion sensor. That's what the magnet is on the door knocker. So it makes it versatile for a lot of different things. It's a lot of fun.
We have some diagrams too, guys, that'll help break some of this down too, coming up in a few minutes. So
Sure. Are there any questions?
do you know what causes haunted attractions to shut down before they even get started? The top 3 roadblocks are lack of funding, lack of leadership, lack of resources. As a member of the Haunters Toolbox, you get instant access to the tools you need to start and grow your own haunted attraction business. To get started, become a member at haunterstoolbox.com.
That's a tiny picture.
Yeah, that one
That
didn't
is a
show
tiny
up
picture.
very good.
Sorry about that. So that's off of
Try to zoom in on that.
yeah, there you go. Still tiny.
Still tiny. I think we have some other pictures of those though, don't we?
Yeah. So that's online. That's a guy I think he's a genius, and he makes these joints. So this is a kit that he sells. And if you want to get into animatronics, but you don't want to you're not really handy, you don't have the tools, you don't have the space to make stuff, you can get this kit. You can get the PVC yourself, and he has all the joints and the motor and the mount. And all you do is you put it all together, and you cut the PVC to fit. And then this is like a groundbreaker kind of animatronic. That's done with a motor, and it's easy and it's fun, and you just let it keep going and it'll just do that motion, or you could put it on a motion sensor.
And that's Spider Hill. That
Yep, Spider Hill. All right. This is one I did for Dark Hour. And these are every time we walked by this room, we kept thinking it was people. So these are we made these people, and this is a rotating dais. Now all 3 of these take human weight, and the middle one has an actor on it, and we had a fake body like that made of tape, and then looks like he's dancing, but the girl is fake, and you open up the thing, you move her, and it's like a huge mouth that looks like it's eating guests, and he could chase them around the room with that. So they all moved at different rates. So it looked like they were ballroom dancing, and that was pretty cool. And as you saw there, that was just a simple motor, and I just cut out an old tire with a hole saw, and that was what drove that thing. It's just a big wooden circle on a 2-foot Lazy Susan that takes human weight. So I think it takes like over 1,000 pounds. So that wasn't a problem.
I
And
got some pictures
simple,
of that too coming up.
yeah, very simple and effective. This one is this could be done with a piston or a motor. This one is a piston, and we call it the humping leprechaun. And it was for our St. Patty's show, and he's just kind of popping in and out of that. And he used to have a cat next to him, like he was like, I don't know what is that, against cats for this show, but so we took the cat away and we did something else with it over there. You'll see in a minute. But that just ran all night long. So this guy's kind of popping out, and the whole idea was to have it like the scene from where all the gremlins are in the movie theater, and just stuff is just total pandemonium and things are going all over the place. So that was the kind of thing with these leprechauns for the Irish show.
There'll be a video of that here coming up too.
Okay.
Of all of them.
All right. This is a simple cam mechanism, and this one, where it is, where you see the right and the left there, that actually went to 2 shoulders that had a leprechaun on a barrel, like a big whiskey barrel, and it made him kind of swing like this. And this went up to his shoulders, and the motion was this. Just went up and down, and that made him swing back and forth. And you'll see him in that video of all things. So this, as we go through, is just how to wire some of the, on a FlexMac, for example, some of the triggers. One of the biggest questions I get is, how do you make things move? So the first one's a pressure mat. Okay, and this is right off Fry Prop's website. This is of the user manual, but you can see, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know how to wire it. You just jumper the positive to the C, and then there's different ways you can trigger different things. Motion sensors, what most people use, but some kind of pressure mat or something. If you're outside or in your lawn, pressure mat might be difficult unless you put like a doormat or something over it, which works out pretty well. But that's just how you wire those things together.
Yeah, one of the things that when I first started looking at some of this stuff is I wasn't sure about that jumper wire. And I think that's the important one, because you are making an electrical circuit. You can't just plug the 2 wires in from your switch. They need to go over here, and then you need something that connects that power to them. So that's an important
that's the jumper wire right there
for people to
remember. And you'll see on all 3 of these examples, whether it's a push button, which is the same thing as a pressure mat, they all use that positive, the red wire that goes over to the common to the trigger. So basically, if you had a separate thing that gave it 5 to 12 volts to the trigger, then you wouldn't need to go to the left there. You could just do it with the two wires like you mentioned, but most people don't, and that's a pretty unique thing. So most of these things, just like you said, you have to jumper that little wire so it gives it the positive, and then the switch is basically the negative.
Okay.
Now, if anyone listening has any issues with these stuff or you're confused or whatever, don't be afraid to ask, because if you have a question, I guarantee other people do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a diagram I did of a really cool. This is another one of my favorites that I've ever done, and I had this planned for a while, but I didn't have anywhere to put it. So we went to dark hour. We had these really high ceilings, and they let me do it. So this was a chandelier, and it dropped on top of the fake piano, and the three rings are held together by chain. And you see on the right picture there, they all fall within themselves, so it collapses completely flat. And I welded tubes on the sides of the metal rings, which I made to look like candles, and I wired them to light up. And then it had steel cable, not wire rope, steel cable. Big difference there. And it went to pulleys, and it went behind the wall where we had a 3-foot piston, which is, you see the blue there. And then I put two pulleys on the top that the cable was attached to. So the trick of it was, I wanted to get 6 feet of travel from a 3-foot piston. And the way to do that is to keep those two pulleys you see on the all the way on the far right on the top there. There's two pulleys that are pretty close to each other, right? A little more to the right. Yeah, there you go. To the left, right there. Those two right there, those two right next to each other. That makes the wire go all the way down and all the way up every time it raises and lowers. So that gives you 6 feet of throw on a 3-foot piston. If you move those pulleys further apart, you only get 4 feet. So it's amazing if you put those together what you get with that. So originally, the idea was we let the piston go and it releases and the chandelier crashes to the table. Well, of course, with air, it doesn't move that fast. So that's not what happened. So instead, it moved too slow. It was just kind of like floating down, which is a cool effect if it was a ghost, but we wanted to do a scare. So instead, I come up with this idea. I did two 600-pound, not that it was that heavy. It was 50 pounds, but it was 50 pounds. That's heavy. Two 600-pound electromagnets you see on the top there, right above the chandelier. And I made this cool little mechanism that attached to the cable. And it was like an octagon of flat metal. And so you had a magnet on either side of the cable. And this octagon, because the cable turns as it lifts. So you never know exactly where it's going to land on those magnets. Now, initially, I had it where it was just a bar, and it did work 90% of the time. But there was that 10% where it didn't. And then no one got that scare, which has come back down. So I come up with this octagon, basically grab the magnets, and the whole story of that is then the piston would relax and release. So then that's why you see the slack in the picture on the left. That's the cable just kind of hanging down there. And so when you let that piston go with the magnets, it literally drops, and accelerates 9.8 meters per second. So it's going faster the whole time until it hits that piano. Now, oddly enough, human eyes detect that rate of acceleration. And so that is scary because you know that it's actually going faster and it's going to stop when it hits. And so you're psychologically, you know that. And you see it at the corner of your eye and it scares you before you even hear the sound. So then Jake had this great piano sounds like, it had its own clash. It was plenty loud, but then had that nice piano ringing sound, which is awesome. And then the candles on it would go out, and then you'd move on through the room, and then it would reset. The piston would pull down, and it would bring the chandelier all the way up, and it would catch those magnets. Give it a second to catch, and then it would relax again. Now, the biggest challenge I had with this, besides it's a wear item, with all the pulleys and stuff. It's 50 pounds. It's dropping, a couple hundred times a night. And so once you get the right size pulleys so they didn't jump out, if you ever done string and pulleys, you know what I'm talking about. The cable has to be just the right size so it can't jump around. And then the magnets held it, and that's great. But the biggest problem I had initially was no matter what I did, I could not get the damn LEDs to not get cut or bounce or go out on the candles because they're in a steel tube. Right. So I wired it so the wire went down that chain and it was flexible enough, and that was fine. And then when it got into the back of the candles there, every time they bounced, the metal rings would shear off those lights. And I tried caulking, I tried E6000, which is my magical go-to. I use E6000 for everything. And silicone, I tried everything. But what really worked finally is I use heat shrink for pretty much any electronics. Anywhere you got metal and wire together, I put a little piece of heat shrink on it and as like a little buffer. And I use clear heat shrink. And when I did the flicker lights on there, actually they were just bright LEDs, and we put a flicker circuit in the controller. But so when I did that, I did a tight one on all the wires. So there was clear heat shrink on all the wires all the way down. And then I would do concentrically bigger pieces of clear heat shrink on it. And the final one went around the outside of it as well. Now, the thing is, while it's really hot, you can kind of mold it almost. You can twist it. So the LED was actually inside the metal sleeve protected. And the only thing above that was a bunch of tubes of heat shrink that looked like a candle. And when they lit up, that looked like the candle, and it worked great. That was the last time I had to replace an LED in that thing. So that worked out awesome. Learned by my mistake.
Don't we all?
Well, thank you for sharing that, because that's a tip that got my mind working. So
I'm telling you, that stuff is awesome. I use it for pretty much everything. I used to do a lot of color coded stuff for different things, but now I just use a label maker and then use the clear.
This podcast episode sponsored by Scarlet Badges.
We always were looking for ideas to get those actors to take it to the next level. I really want to do something that they can use more than just a meal, or they can use more than just a that a boy, that a girl. They love this stuff, but it's not really promoting a haunter. And then I sit down, Scarlet Badges comes out. That's when I realized this is amazing, because not only is it giving them an attaboy, but it's also promoting them all year round. And to promote somebody, to give somebody accolades all year round and have them be able to wear it on their shoulder with pride means a lot. This right here says this is who nailed it on this day in this year for the rest of their life, for the rest of their haunting life. And that's what I really love about this product, is you're able to give haunting to somebody an attaboy 365 days a year. And that's, so hats off to you guys. I think this is a great product, and I wish you the best of luck because it's awesome.
Get your Scare Badges at scarebadges.com.
So this is one we did for the Irish show as well. This is a motor with cams, and a piston won't work on this only because it actually rotates. So you've got on the bottom there, you've got what looks kind of weird. What it is you've got that U shape is they're different lengths. So one is 5 inches of a U shape, one is like 10 inches of a U shape, one is 12. And they're all at 4 different points of the compass. If you look at it from the motor end, it looks like, 4 different directions. And so the point is, when you have it, the cable goes from there to a pulley on the wall, to a pulley above the table, and then right over the body on the table. And we got these tooth fairies on there that Alan came up with. And it was just basically, they're like fairy dolls with just teeth. So there's just teeth, just hair and teeth. That's all they are. And they would come down and at different rates and take bites out of that body is how it looked. And we had a couple on the body too. But when this rotates, each one of the fairies comes up and down at a different rate. And so no two are coming up or down at the same time, because underneath, those are at 4 different points of the compass. So when one is too far away, the other one is closest, and the other 2 are halfway there. And so it was a really cool effect. And, people were like, how do they do that? Because they were moving up and down. And they thought maybe someone was like pulling a string or something, and that wasn't the case. But again,
someone was pulling a string. It was just a motor instead of a person.
Right. Back in the day, that would be us. But that just ran, and it worked really, really well. And I think they reutilized that for a couple things after I left and came back up north.
Isn't that how the Pepper's Ghost kind of is on strings and pulleys?
Nope. Pepper's Ghosts is a mirror, a 2-way mirror.
Right. Dimmers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you light up one side and then you light up the other. All right. This should be the video of the mayhem that is the leprechauns. So this is all the lights on.
There's a lot of stuff going on in there.
A lot of stuff going on. So the Dark Eye was all a bunch of witches. So the leprechauns have taken the witch's hat. They've taken the witch's broom. They took her wand. They have her cat. Okay. So got a drunk leprechaun on the thing there. The chandelier is stationary for that show, and it's got a motor pulling it back and forth. There you see the guy on the whiskey barrels going back and forth.
We'll play one more
right? There you go. So a lot of stuff going on.
that all electronic motors or any air?
This one is all motors,
All
only
motors.
because of where they were. If there was any issue, I didn't want to have to, climb a ladder in the middle of the show to mess with the piston. So, and they just ran, so they were pretty easy. They're on at the beginning of the day and off at night.
It's a cool room.
Yeah, it's a cool room. So this is another one that wasn't on that video. It's a little more to the right there, but basically, you've got a cable on the neck on both of these or the shoulders, and the motor underneath had a cam and it just went back and forth, just like literally back and forth. And when it was pulling one, it was relaxing the other. So these two leprechauns, one was standing up, the other one was bending forward, and vice versa. So it looked like they were trying to pull a cat in half, like they do.
What was the framing? Was it wood or?
Yeah, these are just wood. And with we made these bodies called Timmies, and so this was a foam, like a wire armature. This one had some wood in it, and then they were foam filled, and then with the heads were like a latex mask. So we used these as leprechauns, we used them as elves, we used them as all kinds of things. And this one, of course, I cut them in half, and then did
Hinged him at
a
the hip.
hinge, right? So that way, if you let them go, they would just fall forward, not all the way down, but pretty low. So the steel cable that allowed them to bend forward and back was on the shoulder, and that's what kind of kept them up and pulled them down. And that's a close up of the of one of the turntables that the bodies were dancing on, the ballroom dancers, and right there you can see that wheel, and it's just made out of a piece of tire because there wasn't any kind of. I tried every kind of little wheel and tire that would turn those, and nothing could they would just shred in a matter of minutes. And I tried metal, and that would just skip, nothing would work. And I thought of doing a big rubber band, but that slipped and ended up melting too. So this actually was the best thing because I didn't want to slow the motor down per se. I wanted it just to run at that speed, and a bigger tire made them spin way too fast. So I took I think it was an inch and a half hole saw and just cut a couple holes in some old tires and bolted those on to the end of the motor itself, and that was the gear to turn that
Hmm.
piece of wood.
Very innovative, but works.
Thank you. I was desperate.
That's how I work things too. Whatever's
Yeah.
around me.
So this is the bottom of that mechanism. Again, real simple. It's just the motor right there mounted on the bottom, and I made the plywood that is the platform for it just deep enough with the 2x3 frame there to have the height of the motor itself, and then the wheel is on top.
What kind of motors are these? What you have a different?
Those are you can get those from Fry Props. You can get them from eBay. You can get them from Amazon. They are car wiper motors, which I just had to replace mine last month.
They
I
can
think I
take
knew how
some
to do it.
torque.
Yes, they've got some serious torque, and that is a good thing. So, but and since we are talking about mechanisms, stuff like that, one of the big things if you're going to make your own animatronics, one of the big things to remember is, you've got to don't make it work too hard. Okay, if the motor has to pull a Herculean amount of weight because something as simple as the arm that the lever is pulling is too short, then it's eventually going to stop working, either a burnout or a break or something will wear through. So keep in mind, you want to have it work as least amount as possible, just like you would do all night. You know what I mean? So what I mean is, let's say something as a visual example. You have a letter T and you have a bolt with a piece of wood or PVC as the top piece of that T, and you have a motor with an arm on the one side, and you got a string tied to the end of that T, right? So if you have it on the very end of that T and it's got a bolt in the middle, when that motor goes around, that T is going to be like a big seesaw. Let's go up and down just like a seesaw, right? Now, if you take that same rope and you put it real close to the center where the bolt holds the two pieces together, you'll get some movement, but it has to work really hard to give you that movement. And eventually, if you put any kind of weight on the other end of that bar for that seesaw, it's not going to be able to lift it. So that's called the fulcrum, which is the balance point in the center. So, as simple as before you attach anything permanently, attach it temporarily till you find that sweet spot, which gives you the amount of motion you want without having to have the mechanism, piston, motor, whatever, work too hard to give you that. And that'll allow the things to last longer and work better for longer.
One of the things Milton mentioned in regards to getting the motors and that sort of stuff is Monster Guts, another good source of
Yeah, that's a good source. They're around
it's-
30-40 bucks depending where you get them.
yeah.
I have seen them as low as 25, but that was a while ago. So, I've seen them as high as 80. So it depends where you go. But they're all 12 volts. They're made for cars. Obviously, so they're 12 volts in America.
Now,
And
would you recommend going to your local salvage yard and picking some up from there? Is that
back
a
in the day,
viable source?
that's how we had to do it. But and most of those will be fine. Depending if you're doing like a pro haunt or something, I would get a new one, but only because you're going to be expecting a lot of it. But if you're doing something in your lawn, you want something to do some cool civil movements, and you work the fulcrum out so it doesn't have to work too hard, that's not a problem at all. If you get a good deal, get it. I have these laying around all the time. You know what I mean? So it's like not everyone's going to be in the same position I'm at. And like, hey, could you make this thing for me? Like, I got a thing tomorrow, but tomorrow, so whip something together with some 2x4s and a couple of 5-inch bolts and a couple of washers. You know what I mean? You can make that happen, and it would probably work for a long time. It's just something to consider. All right, and there's a close up of that poor tire piece that turned that turntable. They
But it
wore out. I
worked.
had to replace them during the whole month of the show. I had to replace them twice. Still not bad. All right. This is just obviously this is from Right Props, right from their page, and it just kind of this is the same motion sensor that most of us use. It's the old security home motion sensor, and you can see uh, the wires on the back and what they do. So when you put these into your controller, you usually do the black and the white and you tie those together. And the red is positive, and that powers the unit. And then the green is the signal that actually turns it on. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
you've got the unit needs power to work. That's the red and the black. The unit needs to send a signal that triggers whatever you're triggering, an animatronic or a controller, and that's the green wire. So when you tie the black and the white together, that's giving it the negative to do both, and the red powers the whole unit.
What are the jumper pins? What are those?
You probably won't need those. Those are for the jumper pins are basically they tell you what they're for on the circuit board, but basically one is normally on, normally open, normally closed, and the other one is for the LED. So if you don't want the LED to show up every time it's triggered, it's handy to have the LED on when you're first doing it, so you can see if it's actually triggering where you want it to be. But then I usually disconnect that so that it doesn't light up and telegraph where something is. And the other thing with these is they throw a wide net, so to speak. So they tend to they have a bit like a I guess like a big fan that comes out, and so anything in front of it, it detects heat, and they'll set off. But if you want to have just a narrow space where it's going to detect motion, I usually put this in the back of a PVC pipe. So like a 2-inch, 2.5-inch PVC pipe. I even cut it out so the ends go around the sides of it, and then heat gun it so it kind of hugs it, and then it kind of holds the whole thing. And you've got one unit that is like, it's like a little like gun barrel, and it only detects things right where you want it.
That's a
Cool
good
idea.
idea. How
And there
many
you just
how
see
many
the scene.
how many years did it take you to figure that one out?
I actually, believe it or not, I figured it out pretty quick because we had a couple of things where by the time the guests walk by, either the thing is starting to go and they're already gone, or they're waiting there for something to happen, and it just takes too long. So once you get it where they're right where you want them in that sweet spot, and then the thing does whatever it's supposed to do, and then if they move, then it doesn't do it anymore. So then they think the show's over and they continue, and that gives you your throughput. Otherwise they'll sit there and they'll watch a thing all night long if it's really good.
Just that's kind of like going to these motion sensors. Sometimes we got to put tape over them just to get that
Exactly.
to narrow
Same
down the
thing.
line of sight.
Yeah, same idea. But the way I do it with the PVC though, that allows me to put, I don't know, the couple of ones we did in Salem, I put like we had those like wooden tribal masks, and I put one of those in front of it, and it was actually like on a shelf, so you didn't know it. Another one I put in like a big Grecian vase in the back of that, so it just looks like scenery. You would never know that that's a motion sensor. So that worked, because you always have people that are trying to see where the motion sensors are. If they know there are there, they're trying to trick them. They're waving their hands around. They're jumping up and down. They're look like they're on secret camera show or something. And they can never find them, and that's something I'm pretty proud of.
And what are these called? Are they IR sensors or?
Yes, that's an IR infrared sensor, and it
Yeah.
detects infrared, which is basically a form of heat. And so when they first come on, this is the other thing. They go for like 2 minutes on most of these because the controller keep sending a signal for 2 minutes until it actuates. What it's doing is it's sensing the area and getting like not a map, but it wants to see what the ambient temperature is at the moment. And so a change in that up or down is what will set it off. So that's why they go for 2 minutes. When you first turn them on, you're like, oh my God, stop. And then they go into their normal dormant state until they're triggered. But that's why they're trying to figure out what the ambient temperature is.
Now, does fog set those off?
Usually, no, not on its own, because fog usually is not a different temperature.
Yeah.
But you still don't want it to be wet. So, feel free to put that in a Ziploc bag. These I use on everything. These power connectors, I can't recommend them enough. ProHaunts, home haunts, whatever. It's just for the power. And so if you're going to disconnect something, or maybe you're going to move something, or you've got a power connector to your controller, and you're doing like an extension or something like that, or a group of things, use these. They're not that expensive. They're well worth it. I buy them 50 at a shot. And that way, let's say something goes wrong and you want to switch it out. Do you want to sit there in the middle of a show or in the middle of your lawn or wherever you are and be stripping wires, or do you want to just plug something in? I want to plug something in. So I use these for a lot of things.
Yeah, we use those in our lighting a lot.
Yep. I don't restrict them to power. I'll use them instead of using the phono plugs, which I use those too. They have terminal end phono plugs, which you can do for sound and stuff. But if I've got different things that I'm making devices for to trigger different things, I'll put a set of these on, and anything that could be messed up with power going to it, I make sure I put a positive end on it. So that way you can't mistakenly put power to that area. Does that make sense?
It's a good hack.
Yeah, it's a good hack. So this is the Booflex controller, which again, I love it. If you want to get started in animatronics and you want them to do stuff with sound and motion and lights, and you want to have fun doing it, I highly recommend getting a Booflex, Flex Max 2, all those things. Now, they're not inexpensive, but as far as controllers go, I think they're one of the best because all their stuff is compatible with all their other stuff. It takes, if you notice, it takes an SD card here on the right of the controller, which means you take that card out, you put it in your computer, and you download the software, and you can actually have fun programming it. And you can put your own sound on it and hear it, and it'll play through either powered speakers, or you can plug speakers right into it. And if you get the full blown version, it's got dimmable lights at the end. The new one, FlexMax 2, has 4 dimmable lights. They control DMX stuff, which again, a little more advanced if you're just starting, but some of that stuff is plug and play. And then they can also control servo. So like in my haunt, I've got a creepy dollhouse you'll see behind me, and it goes through a whole sequence that kind of tells a story. And during that, doll heads turn and look at you, and their heads are controlled by DMX with servos. So that's all something you can grow into later on. But even initially, I would highly recommend one of these boo boxes. What you see on top there is a relay. That's a 12-volt relay, and they're really affordable. You get them on Amazon, whatever, and they go when the show is triggered. The show that you write is triggered. It puts 12 volts through this red and black wire, and it goes into that little relay, and you see a little yellow jumper there. That's our famous jumper. They have those in everything. With that jumper on, whenever it gets power, it triggers the relay. Otherwise, it's waiting for a signal. So we just want it to go on. And then on the other end, you've got common NO for normally open and normally closed. So basically, most of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be normally open. And then when it triggers, it's like touching 2 wires together or pushing a button, and that will set off whatever you want to do. Now, you definitely need one of these if you're going to trigger something that's 110 volts, for example. You can wire in an extension cord to one of these, and then it's actually triggering through a 12-volt system, 110-volt thing, whether it's a fog machine, a bubble machine, or some other kind of 110-volt device. And you can do it safely with this. If you're going to do something like that, I always put it in a gray box, which is an exterior electrical box. So it's all sealed up nice and neat. And inspectors love that. But I can't stress enough how many people who start with this stuff blow up devices because they don't realize that they need a relay. So relays are very helpful for a lot of things, not only not blowing your stuff up and going between different voltages, but also like that door you saw, I needed a relay in the beginning because it had a read sensor. It's basically a magnet sensor, which you can set up if people are going by something and they have to like open a gate or something. You could put a relay sensor just like you do for your security system at home, and that you can't put 12 volts to. You need a relay. So as an example, something like that comes in handy. And most people don't realize that. And they go through an entire box of relays before they realize they blew them all up, not knowing that read sensors rather, sorry, before they realize they needed a relay. So I can't say enough about those.
What's the difference between the boo boxes? Is it just because you get more functionality with the bigger ones, or?
Well, now they've phased out the BooBox Flex Max like you see here. Now they've got the Flex Max 2, which actually I have to say, I got some at the show and I'm a huge fan. So it does everything that this older model did, but it does it better and it does it more. And you used to have to do the volume with these little tiny pod things on the lower right of the control, those little blue things. You put a little screwdriver in there and you turn them up and down for the volume. Now it's just two buttons on the actual device. You just hold them in and it raises and lowers the volume. So, you can do it without needing a flashlight or anything weird. And they've got LEDs on it to show you progress of things. Like when you load a show, often they'll do updates. The other good thing is they're always updating these, which is good, the firmware. And when you first put it in, it doesn't update. So now it has LEDs that show you the progress of that. Kind of like when Windows loads, you got the progress bar. Well, now it's got a progress bar. Before you were like, I don't know when it's going to be done. It could be 5 minutes. It could be, 20 minutes. And now it shows you what that is. So it also handles things like DMX and things like that a little easier. And it's just really good. The other thing is it's got, this one has 3 dimmable if you get the full 16 controller version. 3 dimmable LEDs you could do at the end. Now the Flex Max 2 has 4. So that's pretty cool. I use those a lot for different stuff.
Now this is pretty high end and offers some stuff. What about the other things that they offer, such as what do they call it, the Peekaboo and
Yeah. Those are great too. So again, I'm always going the high end because here's the thing. It's like if you get into this and you like it, you're like, wow, I want to do more. I want to do this and that. And then you have to buy another controller. But if you buy this, it does everything. But you're right. If you have like standalone thing, most of your thing is actors, you want to do just a couple of things, like maybe 2 functions, maybe just turn something on and off and a light, then the smaller units they have are really, really good. Not all of them take the card, so you can't all do them in director, and some of them you have to push a button to program. But if you're only doing one motion or turning on one light, then most of them have 2 at least. So that's easy to do. It's really not that hard. And even if you've never done them before, you can push a button. So that makes it pretty simple.
Sometimes you can just bypass that and just have a motion sensor or whatever.
Yep. Right. So this is a company, Spider Hill Prop Works. I think this guy's a genius. And so this is just a simple, as you can see, it's a simple motor, and all it does is turn that wheel around, and you'll see the fulcrum is not making it work too hard. But you don't want to put anything super heavy on top of that. But it looks like the zombie is swaying back and forth. You could have it be Santa with elves. You could have it be whatever you want. But when you buy this kit, you get the PVC pipe yourself, and that's when all dressed up. He sends you the motor, a metal mount for it, and all the pieces you need to put the PVC together. So pretty handy. Big fan. And when I was starting out, we had to do all this stuff ourselves. Actually, sometimes we still do. So I was just telling him before the show, we did International Monster Museum in Salem. I guess it's going almost 2 years now. And when you wanted to do a creature that's bigger than human size, like I built the biggest Frankenstein I've ever did. It was over 8 feet tall. And I was telling him I had to cut it down because it didn't fit in the room. But proportionally, his shoulders were 3 feet wide. I mean, the thing is gigantic, and everything is proportionate. So the length of the arms and everything are accurate to what a body would be. And then I did a Mothman with a mask from Alan Hops, and then the rest was all built from scratch, all PVC joints and wire mesh to give it the girth of the body, and made wings out of PVC as a frame, and then stretched gray spandex on it for the wings. It came out really great, but again, it's all done with PVC, and we could easily take that joint like we did here in the middle and make any of those figures move. You could do it with just the elbow or just the arm and make just the arm move. Any of those things are pretty easy. So if you have something like this that you're looking at right now, and instead of the motor on a base, you put it up at the shoulder, attach it there. You could have the arm go up and down. You could have it go back and forth. There's no limit to the kind of things. Now, usually for something like that, they would use a piston. And now a motor just does the same thing the whole time, back and forth. That's all it does. And it does it great. And they usually last a real long time. If you want to have it start and stop and do one thing and then do another thing, then you want a piston. And again, that can be attached right where the collarbone would be, and that would go to where the middle of the upper arm would be, and that would make the arm go back and forth with a piston, for example. So again, pretty easy to do with this kind of setup. You got a couple of his stuff on here. Yep. So that's just another picture of the frame you just saw, and this is I don't know if we can get it closer on that. But this is the kit. So it's a metal base, and it's got the hips go on it, and the legs go on it, and the motor attaches right to it. And when you buy his kit, you get that whole thing. Now you can do this yourself, and God knows I have. You just mark out where the hole's got to be for the motor to sit, and or piston, depending what you're doing. And but this is pretty convenient, and I think it's like for the whole kit for this moving kit, it's like $100, and then the PVC probably run you, I don't know, $30, $20. So for that, you got basically an animatronic, which is
But
pretty
with
good.
that same kit, you can make your 5'2" one, and you can make your 6'6" one,
Exactly.
and add some variety to your zombies instead of buying them off the shelf where everything is exactly 5'8", right?
Right, exactly. If that's all. And but yeah, so they got that, and you could use the same mechanism to make a dog head move, or some weird creature from Stranger Things or whatever move, all kinds of stuff. You're not limited to anything. But what I liked about this, and the way I want to put it down again, I really like his stuff, is it's well made. But the big thing is it shows you how easily, with just a motor mounted on a plate, you can do all kinds of motion.
Now I just did a scare tactics class, and I really like these animatronics that just move because they're good distractions. You can set
Right.
them in the corner with a light and have an actor come from the other side or from behind it.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of people say, are there any scare? That's just a set that when you buy the kit, that's what you get. But so a lot of people ask, are animatronics scary? I'm like, well, it depends on the animatronic. One that I saw that always worked was I actually forget who made it, but it was at the time it was a like a suit of armor, knight, and the arms were down, and then the arms would come up at the elbow and would lean forward really quick, and that one actually got people every time. And there's a couple out there that move really quick, and they work really well, and they're not going to knock your teeth out, and they're pretty scary.
But
So it
even these
depends
ones
on.
that are just generally moving, they provide a distraction, and they also provide cover for your actor, because that way, with a bunch of things moving, it's less likely that they're going to see your actor maybe accidentally breathe as they walk into the room.
Exactly.
I love
Yeah, that
that
was the
one
whole.
with the dancers that you had, where
Exactly.
one
Yeah.
person is real, everything is moving, and there's only one thing that's real that,
Right. And you'd never know. And we also had
exactly.
another actor behind the curtain. So they'd usually do a 1-2. So they would think, when he's going to move, when he's going to move. And the actor come out from the curtain, get them all. And then the guy in the middle would move and chase him out of the room.
Yeah,
So, you got
brilliant.
like a threefold
Brilliant.
thing there. But yeah, any kind of movement is good.
Guys, if there's any questions, Ed got through his videos and photos. I've uploaded some. I was just going to go through some things and ask Ed some questions as I was rolling through them myself. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
I know I've got a couple of questions for Ed, and
Yeah.
one of them near the beginning when you were talking about the chandelier dropping on the piano. You emphasized using steel wire over cable. What's the difference, and why do you use one
Well,
over the other?
yeah, use the steel cable, aircraft cable over steel wire. And wire is basically it's metal rope. So it's just twisted, and it's not really a cable. A cable is an interlaced device, really, that doesn't loosen up when it does not have tension. So it's much more sturdy. It takes thousands of pounds of weight depending on the thickness of it. We use a pretty thick thing, aircraft cable, and it's much more durable. And everything that goes through pulleys eventually will wear.
Mm-hmm.
And the rope, we didn't know how long it would last, and it broke unexpectedly on us because we didn't check it soon enough. And so we ran out real quick to Harbor Freight, and we got metal rope and instead of cable, and it lasted 2 days. It got us through the weekend, but it was basically garbage after that, and it was falling apart before the end of the second night. So the cable, however, lasted for months, like through I think 5 different shows that lasted without having to switch it out.
Aircraft cable then is the way to go, not steel wire.
Aircraft cable, right? And I use the 16th inch aircraft cable on everything. It holds an incredible amount of weight, super small, And like a lot of the things you saw that in the Leprechaun thing, if like the two guys that were pulling the cat, that was done with 16th inch aircraft cable with the crimps on it. And so anything that something was pulling, I would have a terminus there with an aircraft cable and a loop. You know, they have those little loops you put into it, little teardrop loop, and that way I could use the dog connectors, the clips on it, and that way I could disconnect it or reconnect it depending. You know, the whole thing is like if there was a problem, if a cable broke and you don't have those disconnects in there, you got to rewire the whole damn thing, like take it apart sometimes. You know what I mean? Whereas if you have those disconnects in, whatever breaks is what you fix.
That leads me perfectly into my next question, those green connectors and using those so you can just disconnect and reconnect.
Right.
But one thing I noticed on a couple of pictures is there's only 2 wires on there, but there's 3 wires coming off of the windshield wiper and motor. Why? Which ones do you use?
Okay, so that is a good question. Which one you use depends on what you think you need. So what those wires are is they are 2 different speeds. And so I think the blue one is the fastest one, if I remember right, but there's a slower one and a faster one.
Good picture, yeah.
Right. So the green one is the slower one, and the blue one I think is the faster one. So I almost always use the slower one, and but you can switch it out depending what you need. So obviously, the slower it is, the higher the torque. So if you're moving something heavy, slower is better.
And then the red is the main power wire?
That is correct. That is the positive.
So that makes sense. Like if it's a windshield wiper, probably the fast speed and the slow speed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's either
those are my questions. Anybody else, please throw your questions into the chat. If there's anything that you noticed while we have a captive Ed Gannon, let's ask away.
These are just some videos that I think where I took at Transworld. This is DC Props. I was kind of impressed by their.
Yeah, these guys are great. These are all air. See, that's
DC Props. Where'd you come from? DC Props. Might be Bright Theater. Bright Props.
What's
Here, look at these motors.
Feel free to.
so that one moves things back and forth.
The pumper.
That's how you put something that's leaning out forward.
Spinner.
Again, well done. You know, all nice and metal. I got a question. Where did I learn to weld? Actually, I learned some of that in high school, and then the rest of it was self-taught. Because you know, when you need to get something done, you got to figure it out. Someone have a question about a FlexMax?
Chris asked earlier what do you use for playback for animatronics, and I think that was kind of covered by using that FlexMax, but I just want to make sure that that's satisfactory to Chris. I want to make sure that we get his question answered. So,
yeah. I mean, there's lots of controllers out there. I just happen to be partial to FlexMax, but there's a lot of them that work great that are decently priced. But the reason I keep pushing that one is because as you grow and want to have more things triggered, they can all be triggered by FlexMax or some of the other things if they've got an on-off trigger. But this one allows you to do quite a lot. Like I've had complete rooms tell an entire story, doing dozens of things, including a theater in Salem, where I link 2 of those together, and it does the entire show. So pretty cool.
yeah, I've had the chance to use a FlexMax too, and I have some grand ideas. But the software Director is free, is really easy to use.
Yep.
And you just download it to the card, and you can, you know, program all of your stuff. You basically say on channel 1 you're going to do this, and channel 1 is a light, so you turn the light on, and then you shake the floor, and then you pause for, you know, 0.3 of a second, and then you shake again, and then you pause for another half a second, and you can do all of that through the software very easily, and just plug the chip back in, and it, you know, does all of that. It shakes your floor, flashes the lights, makes the volcano blow up with the firing a fog machine. And It works really well.
Its strongest thing is it's easy to change.
Yeah.
So there was another company that was competing with Fry Props years and years ago, and they were just so difficult to get the software to work correctly. I think that's probably why it kind of fell by the wayside. But yeah, I mean, here you can see like there's a simple motor there, and they show you how to do the thing as fast and slow and all that stuff. So the park and the two different park things, that's new on some of the more advanced motors. So
Okay.
the white one that you see there, that's a very slow. We call it they call it a deer motor too. So like you see Christmas animations in people's lawns, and they get the deer that moves super slow. That's a very slow. I forget how many RPMs a minute. Maybe it's 4, but it's really slow. So there's a lot of you want to have some creepy zombies in the background and move really slow. That would work.
Chris, now Chris
Okay.
says he's working more on Disney-like audio animatronics. FlexMax looks good for jumps. That's kind of where DMX controls come in, because instead of
Correct.
just on and off, you've got what, 256 levels
Yep.
of movement.
Yeah. What I would ask, what when he says audio, what is he talking about, like different things talking at the same time, or just the soundtrack?
Well, while we wait for his
Can I
answer.
speak?
Right.
Or is it am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are, Chris. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, what I'm doing is I'm building a animatronic parrot, kind of like for let me turn my camera back on too. For like basically it's like it's a prop for I have a pirate tiki bar, and
Awesome.
I want to have a drunken parrot that's, just sort of an asshole to the customers. And
Perfect.
he's sitting in a pile of, junk. And when you walk up to him, there'll be a motion sensor that starts a program or starts a sequence. I want to have like 5 or 6 different little sets so
Yep.
that, he can yell at you or, have a drunken song or something like that. So,
That's great.
yeah.
Well, just so you know, I did something like that similar. There's another thing in Salem. Actually, the dollhouse behind me has something. So, Fry Props has a controller. It's a servo controller and
That's
a
what I'm looking for.
DMX controller. Right. Yeah. So the servo controller is pretty good, and you control it from the FlexMax in the same director software. So that way, if you want to have your sound that goes into that, it's all
Mhm.
on one show, and also any lights you want to have to accent it and do your thing with the insult
Okay.
with the guests. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
so you can have complete control. We did a Raven that interacts with a video in Salem, and it does all the motions with servos. Pretty good, gotta
Okay,
say,
cool.
and it was fun to do.
Yeah, that looks, yeah, I mean, I've used fright props before for, I'd worked on Warner Brothers Horror Made here
Nice.
in 18 and 19, 2018 and 2019. I was the visual effects supervisor for that and also did a lot of the well, I did quite a few of the physical gags. But
Jealous.
I used fright props for a lot of the stuff there. I just pre-ordered it and it just came and we just hooked it up and we're done. You know?
They're good for that too.
Yeah, yeah.
So, have
But
you
yeah,
done anything
jumping
with
into the servo world or the DMX world, you have a lot of finer control, whereas some of those other things are off and on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or you
That's what I was
adjust your
asking because,
pressure through pneumatics, but it's
yeah,
still it's an
all
off
we
and
had
on.
were a lot of, I mean, honest to God, we were using garage sensors, the garage doors that prevent
Yep.
garage doors from closing when you walk through them.
Yeah.
We use those as a quick activator. So,
That's a good brake beam. It's
yeah,
cheap as
yeah.
brake beam, that's for sure.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, they were like 10, $15, and every place else was like, if you're buying it from like Fright Max or one of the other prop shops, it was like $40 or $50. It's like going, yeah.
Yeah, I seen them as low as 32 now, which is pretty good. And I got one for 24, the new ones that you don't need a reflector for. That worked
Mm.
out pretty good. But for distance wise, you're never going to beat those garage ones. I mean, they'll shoot,
No. And I mean,
30 feet.
the best part is like if one goes boom, you can rush down to the hardware store and pick up another one.
That is true.
Hunters Depot.
Yeah, Hunter's
Hunters
Depot. There we go.
So on the page here, they've got linear actuators. I just want to touch on that real quick. So what a linear actuator is basically a motor that turns a screw, and that makes the lever go up and down. So it's kind of like a piston, but you control how fast and how far and where it stops. So piston goes all the way out and all the way back, and that's what it does. Linear actuator, you can have it go, anywhere in between, and it's all you can all control it through like servo software on a freight props or any other controller that handles servo stuff. So they're pretty cool. They're used in some stuff in haunts. They have pretty high torque, so that gives them a lot of advantages over a regular servo, which are historically not beefy. And so like we did the Raven, but it, you know, it wasn't really designed to be going every day. So we're revitalizing that one. Outdoor trail suggest for air compressor 110. Okay, so air compressors, obviously the bigger, the beefier, the better. Can you use a Harbor Freight one that's less expensive? Sure, you can. I'm inside for a lot of the attractions that I do, so I like personally California Air brand compressors, and they're very quiet. They have 110 and 220 models. And again, a lot of compressors they want to go 220 if you're doing any kind of volume, but they got some, and a lot of the other 110s are really loud. The California Air, I've had them in my home for over 10 years. I got two little ones that run everything, and pretty effective, I gotta say. And they've got little ones that you can carry just like this, or you got the big tower ones, all different kinds of stuff. And anytime we're putting one in, that's the one I highly recommend. They got a great warranty and they're really strong. Could you just go get one from Home Depot? Yeah, and we do. So there's nothing wrong with that. They're just kind of loud, so just keep that in mind. And I'd put them in a shed or something.
Muffle that sound a little bit or disguise it with loud audio.
Well, unless you're in like a scene with like old cars or a shop or something, and then it
Yeah.
works out fine. Yeah. So you see on the freight props thing here, you've got basically a lot of these are pistons and motors that just make things move back and forth. Pretty easy back and forth motion, but again, really effective. Nice job on those.
They've
Another
really
company I like,
expanded all of their stuff over the last couple of
super.
years for
There's another company that we use a lot of, and they did a custom one for me in Salem. It's Hallucination Creations.
Yes,
And
Mikey.
they're the ones you see. Yeah, they were right behind my booth actually this year. That was cool. And they'll do an actual animation for you complete, but they also sell just the frame of it, like you see here on the screen. So you can just get the bones of it and dress it up yourself. And they're really good welds. Everything's with like ball bearings and grommets and everything. It's super nice. Nice work on those. So if you're gonna go in and get something you're gonna make yourself, and you want it metal, there's someone I would definitely check out.
So on these devices, you just need a controller and an air supply, and
What's that?
for like to hook these up to get these to work, you just need a controller and air supply, or what do you
Well,
need?
to be honest, if it's got just one motion, you could just do you do a motion sensor with hooked up to a valve, just go when it goes by. But yeah, you want a controller really. So even if it's just a basic, just a little boo box controller that has two motions, one for each piston, for example. But then as soon as you do that, you're like, well, I want a light to come on when that happens too. You could totally do that, add a relay, and then put a light on it. And then, well, I want to make sound. Okay. Well, again, now you're getting into a thing where it makes more sense to get one unit that has sound and maybe four different things you could do. So a lot of controllers out there do that, including some of the Boo Flex boxes. So I'd recommend that because that way it's one thing that's triggered. It does all your stuff in one place. And then you can always link those together with other stuff just by triggering them with a relay or however, so that you can do like a whole show or like a sequence, like dominoes. They go in the room and one thing happens and another thing happens and so on and so on. And or like the leprechauns, all the things could happen at once. And all of that stuff can be linked together.
I'm also taking we have some questions on Facebook. I know you guys, our comments don't link to Facebook, but I'm on Facebook on my phone. So Troy said, hi, Ed. Laura said, but we all really just want to know about Buddy Blood.
Buddy Blood is my lounge singing vampire character. And he's a lot of fun. He used to have a stage show at Dark Hour. And so it's fun stuff. So I do that in Salem too. So that's kind of fun. Come to Salem, you can see him sing. But that's pretty good. Someone did ask me about gear ratios. Do I worry about gear ratios? So if depending on how fast you want something to go. So again, if you're doing a motor, for example, you've got the fast and slow speed, and then you can also where the motor is, and you've got the bar. If it just the regular motor goes around, okay, it's so many RPMs, right? So it's kind of fast, but it's not super fast. It's still slow. If you want to make it go slower, the whatever you have that makes the thing go up and down, make that where you connect it further out or closer together. So say you've got a pivot right here and you got a bar right here. Like let's say, do I have anything here? Okay, here. So you got this right here, right? And you want this to do this. So if I connect that motor down here with the little arm that comes with it, and I go 1-to-1 right to here, same distance away, it's going to go exactly as that motor goes. Okay. However, if I extend this out and put it here, and now I do the same motor, now it's going to go slower, right? Because it's got to take it longer to go. If I put it closer, it's going to go much faster. Okay. So those gear ratios really are pretty high torque on those motors, or the Deere motors, they're much slower. So then you have a lower gear ratio. Depends on what you want to have the motion to be. But the big thing to remember is if you're doing it 1-for-1, it's usually pretty good strength on that, good ratio, good torque for different speed. But if you go real fast, real close, you can't put a lot of weight on this because now it's got to work super hard to make that go faster. This has to be lighter. If you have it where you're all the way down here and it's going super slow, this can now be heavier. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Tom, I didn't know what you meant by this comment, but you can connect a potentiometer on that as well, right?
That is correct. And you can slow it down. And they have a device that does that, that's programmable and triggerable. So what a potentiometer is basically a volume button for power, and it turns it up or down and makes it go slower or faster. Now they're totally safe and there's no problem with that. Um, and again, they've got the one that's made for stuff like that, fry props too. Another couple of companies make them. The only thing to remember is if you make sure you've got a with any of these motors, I use a pretty beefy power supply. If you're doing any kind of motor, don't do less than 6 amps. So a lot of people use like 2 or 4, and they wonder why it's either stopping or it's got grinding noises or it's intermittent and it'll stop and then go again. It's not getting enough amps. So for any kind of motor stuff, I usually use 6 to 10, and they're really not much more expensive. You get them on Amazon, whatever, and that way you can also hook up other things besides just the motor. But dedicated 6 amps to a motor minimum for me. So you get that juice, and that really, kind of helps that along.
Brian Green said, use a variable speed controller. I guess that's the same thing from Amazon. Worked out
Yep.
perfectly for a rocking chair.
Yeah, it
No
works out great.
control.
And what I was getting at before that I totally lost track of, sorry, is that when you do slow it down, it also it takes some of the torque out of it. So when you're going slower, you would think with power, because you're basically giving it less power, you would think that it could handle more, but it's the opposite. So without a gear ratio, like you was talking about before, the different gears that make it actually spin slower. If you're taking the power down to make it spin slower, it can do less weight, but still be just as effective, and it's totally fine.
Brian Green also asked for welding. This small type of stock is a 110-volt welder good enough, or should do a 220 welder?
If you got room for 220, that's great. But quite frankly, all the stuff I do in Salem, it's got old power. We just used 110, and we got one of the multi kind of welders that you get from Amazon. And I gotta say, I expected it to. Can we swear on this?
Yeah.
I expected it to. I expected it to suck, but it was actually pretty good. And so the thing that you saw, the ogre door, that piece of metal there, that was 1/8 inch stock and pretty beefy, for what it was doing, and welded it to steel hinges and the bottom plate, and it was a nice clean weld, no problems whatsoever. So not a problem actually. They're pretty good. So I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Unless you're going to support human weight or put them over people's heads or something like that, I'd be a little more concerned about it. But quite frankly, they're pretty good. If you learn how to weld, you'd be amazed how many things that need to be fixed around your place.
And my wife put me to work then. I have to do something. Haitian Manor said, please, Steve, Coachy's animatronic
Yes.
parrot build. He built a parrot and his controller will work well. His book is still available, so I guess he has that in his book.
So when he passed, I covered his animatronics class at Transworld, and I got through it, but it was tough. This is a great guy, a genius. He wrote this book, if you want to get into animatronics, there's some pretty advanced stuff in here, but there's also some easy basic stuff in here. I was gonna thank you for reminding me. I always have it on my shelf over there. I always want to recommend this book. So it's got all kinds of stuff. It talks about the stuff we talked about tonight. It goes into more advanced stuff if you want to do like the three-axis skulls that talk and the eyes that move, and you can make all of those by hand if you wanted to. I would just buy it. But it goes through all the different, some of the older programmers, how to do different sounds, how to do armatures on stuff if you're going to do your things by yourself. Now he used to do a lot of robotic stuff, so that kind of makes that a little easier. Shell did not have any. I couldn't get the rest of that. Can you get that message, or do I get that? There's one that just
How do
popped
you
up.
go from metal framework of a prop to the exterior shell of it and not have any internal linkages bind by the less rigid materials on the exterior? So basically,
So
how do you go from, for example, the picture that's on the screen,
right.
to putting the clothes on that without getting that to bind, but not just PVC in metal?
Okay, so what I normally do is I'll do some kind of let's say you got this shape and you're not doing a human thing, you're doing some creature, right? So I would usually use like a chicken wire or the square mesh, which is the hardware wire, and a little harder to work with, but it's a little more rigid. And then you find a place to mount it to the frame. So that can be done in layers as well. So you can build up the shoulders and then the arms. If the arms are not going to move, you can go from there to the arms, and that's almost like one piece. You do it kind of like medieval armor, if that helps you, for the layering of it. And you want to make sure that anything that's going to move or pivot either has nothing there at all except clothes or fabric, or a plate of just kind of material. It could be just chicken wire, but it's kind of, and I use, believe it or not, I use the small zip ties, which I actually have right here. These small zip ties, right, which are pretty small, and I use those for everything. And you can use those as little hinges on there, which in case there's something you got to get in there to fix it, you just cut those and then you put them back on, and you're in business in 5 minutes. So that's why I like these.
So you're using
But
the zip ties to join two sections of chicken wire or square wire
yep,
together as
as
a
like a
hinge?
hinge, right? And then you
Oh,
just lift that up, right? Lift that up and get to your thing, and then put it back down, put the costume on, you're good to go.
cost
So that's
effective.
it's a good way to do. Cost effective, it's easy, it's quick, and when you're dealing with people, you don't want to hold up your show. That's a good way to go. Hope that answered your question. Thank you.
He goes excellent. Elgin, good. Thank you. Go ahead.
I remember working with chicken wire. I like cut. Well, when you cut it, you have these leftover pieces of wire. Then I take those and
Bend those back.
wrap them around the other pieces. So it
Yeah,
brings it all together.
yeah. Bend those back, or you're gonna be ouchie town.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
get them
first
Yeah.
under
time you
your
gotta sit there and
fingers.
fix something, you're like,
Yeah.
who did this? I did shit. Yay.
That's kind of a cool picture of a setup of
And that's cool. Yeah, you got the air that goes to the regulator that goes to the valve, and then the piston. So, and there you got the control that goes to the sound. So pretty easy layout right there. Does anyone has any specific my question is, does anyone have any specific kind of uses or like weird creatures they want to make that isn't like a normal thing that would be really unusual? That's what I'm curious. Like we did for the I was telling them before we get in, I did the Mothman figure, from scratch. And originally we were going to make that move when we just made it, standard. But it's huge. It's pretty big. It's like 6 feet. I think it's got like a 6 foot wingspan. When they're down. So
Yeah. So this is your time, guys. You got anything you're working on? Even talking parrot.
what you got? The talking parrot thing, that's cool. A lot of work. A lot of work. They look awesome though, and they look great. Another buddy of mine has an outside, tiki kind of pirate bar, and he's got the glass globes and the fishnet, the buoys and stuff, which I love that look. And it was just like supposed to look like just a stuffed parrot, and then of course it starts moving and talking, so that's pretty good. And we did it with like a Teddy Ruxpin thing, so his wife is in the other room like making fun of people. Pretty good stuff.
So do you recommend just PRI motion sensors, or are there other reason to use any other sensors?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it depends on what you want to do. So again, we do a lot of escape room stuff too, and obviously we don't use those for that. But the PIR sensors are usually the go-to because they're easy, they're simple, they're 12 volts, and yes, I do have a tentacle situation I'll tell you about in a second. So, but what I really like now is you'll see the They've got the reflective beam sensor here and the diffused beam sensor. So the diffused beam sensor does not require a reflector on the other side. So we use those a lot now for other stuff. They're more pricey, but they're really effective. So they could just shoot out in a literally like a straight beam. They do widen a little bit, but not a lot. And you just walk by it and it works. So kind of like the PIR sensor, but you get less false triggers on it because again, that's done by heat. So, you know, you throw a hot rock or something, that's gonna, whatever. Not that people have hot rocks, but point is, you have anything like a temperature change or like a car goes by that has exhaust. Again, hopefully it's not by your haunt, but as an example, any kind of change in the air, they'll trigger. You mentioned fog before. Fog alone won't do it, but cold sometimes. If it's cold enough breeze, it can chill something in front of it, and that could set it off. Things like that. Whereas the diffuse beam sensors are pretty effective and pretty good. They're my favorite, hands down, for a trigger sensor. And the gentleman had asked by any recommendations about having a tentacle move. Now I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan, and my place in Salem, I wanted to have. Actually, was going to do the H.P. Lovecraft Museum at one point. So the show a couple years ago, we got a tentacle, and I forget who had one this year. He had some nice ones, really nice ones. And so Alan did a thing with thing was like ping pong buzz and solo cups, and they kind of were all strung together with two wires on either side, and you pull one and it makes the tentacle kind of go like this. You know what I mean? That's an easy way to do it. If you're going to do it with an animatronic, you need some real pull. So I would definitely do it, not a motor. I would do it with a piston, and probably not the skinny tiny one. I would do a nice, nice fat one, and it doesn't need to pull a long bit, but it needs to pull it strong. And I would do the aircraft cable and have it go all the way through on one side, not real close to the skin, but definitely on one side. So say the tentacle's this wide, you have the wire here, and you bring it all the way down. You could theoretically bring it on the outside, and but then it's going to pull on you anyway. Get all the way in there, you get near the front, and you bring it through, and you tie it off around the end of the pointy bit, and then when you pull that, and you have like a PVC pipe or something in the middle just to hold it, it'll turn on you and then go down. So you could have it come up or down. You could have it straight out like this, and it'll go the sideways and something like that. Now, if you do two cables and two pistons, then you could have it literally do this, okay? Which is a lot of work, but it looks pretty awesome. And if you do it with a nice beefy piston and something in the middle that's flexible that can let it go, then it's a pretty strong thing, lasts a long time. The latex, again, will eventually wear out, but it's luckily one of the easiest things to repair. So tentacles are tough,
Yeah.
hot wise.
And there's some tutorials online as to how to build good tentacles, and that's got 4 controls. It's got 4 wires in it.
Yeah, that if you're gonna have go up and down, then yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's awesome.
But it's like, hey, I want to build a tentacle. Watch the video. I don't want to build a tentacle.
Yeah,
but even just doing the 2 wires going back and forth would be something that adds something to it. You could build 2 tentacles, one left and right, one kind of up and down or diagonal, just to give it some different movement without going through those real tough ones. So that's neat.
Funny, we did one of the things we had a dark hour. We had a long tunnel. Basically, it was like a big sewer, and at the end we had like a tall oh my god, I'm blanking on what's the spaghetti monster, the tall guy with the 4 arms,
Slender Man.
So we had Slender Man at the end, and it was really tall. So at the end, it was actually an actor on stilts with the Slender Man mask on. But I built this thing with I think they were 18-foot long arms. It came out, and then the elbows were mounted on the sides. And so when he pulled one for the right and one for the left, these pulleys, which could have been done, this could have been done with a piston instead, because it was kind of hard to pull. The arms all would come in at you like this. So after the guests walked in part of that tunnel, they could like either block them or close them in. It was all 4, 2 up top and 2 on the bottom. So, and they're like really long. So each of the arms that came out from the elbow was like 6 to 8 feet. So pretty big. Hands were like huge. Pretty effective.
And he was doing that on stilts?
Well, no, he was standing on stilts. It was all mounted into the ceiling and on the wall. So when he walked away, the head is still there, and he's wearing a mask of the white head mask. So he kind of stepped out of it. It was almost like a costume he was wearing. It was hung from the ceiling, and he just kind of stepped out and he chased you out the door. So it was kind of a good one too there.
Cool.
And these are they just basically plug and play. Is that what these are? The
So the
outlets in them?
Peekaboo AC, what these take a the Peekaboo AC, I use that in one of the attractions in Salem too. Is basically you plug in a prop and it could be two different props, one and two, and then you have that takes a card, so you actually write a show, and you could have like we use it in the Wizarding World. There's a fairy realm, and you come in and you touch the tree. It's got a proc sensor in the tree, and then the daylight that's in there, like the green kind of fairy daylights fades down because you can fade it, and then fairy lights and stuff come up like nighttime lights. Looks like little lightning bugs and stuff are all over the place, and the soundtrack changes to like crickets and little giggles and things like that. And then it's all timed with the sound, just like a regular director show. And then if you fade it back to number one again, then the lights come back up. And so every time someone touches that tree, they can make it like a little nighttime thing, and then it comes back up. So that's pretty effective.
Cool.
And the same thing with the Pico X is more of a lightning controller. So you have two different things for lightning, and that works off of you can set it to go, like a pin rock spinner, like the lightning FX control they used to have, where it just does it by the sound and it comes with sound activated. So pretty good. I mean, pricey for what they are, but they're really good. The reason the Pico FX is so expensive, partly is because it's got all the resistors in there, and it does a long animation. But
They're durable. They have memory.
Yep.
They have stuff.
Yep.
There's things that you can do to build these yourselves, but you got to get into the world of programming and electronics and know what you're doing. And it's
Huge
easy
pain in the
to
ass.
drop $1.25 to say, here, it's done.
I completely
Press
agree.
the buttons. Way to go.
I built them from scratch, and this is easy.
Yeah.
There are some haunters out there that are making them. They're basic boards. Sometimes they have some cheap covers on them, but
Oh yeah. If you get
other
into that, you like to solder stuff and copy some code into a little Raspberry Pi or something, you can do all kinds of great stuff. But I started back, geez, I'm embarrassed to say, but back when Windows was first invented, I was doing code thing, and I hate doing code. I hate it. That's why I love the fret prop stuff, because it's so easy to just
Well,
go in and
you're into building the mechanical side. Some people are into building the electronic side. So
that's true. I like it all, but yeah, it's easier to do I can concentrate on other parts of the show if I have to sit there and break my head with code.
yeah.
So if that's your thing, it's awesome, and I respect that. I don't want to do it again if I don't have to.
me
You just
either.
partner up with somebody in your haunt that does the one side while you do the other side. Right?
It's me. It's
That's-
just me. I
Yeah.
wish there was someone else I could pawn stuff up on, but no, it's just me.
It's good to know it all, and good to know what you're good at, and then you can concentrate on there's whatever it is that you want in the haunt world. There's somebody out there that is probably doing something. So you figure out what you're good at and what you want to have someone else do, like doing the Fright Props controller, and you're building this stuff and putting it all together and making that show come to life. Other people are into building the controllers themselves, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally with that. And there's things you can do with code you can't do with anything else.
Yeah.
We were doing some escape room stuff right before
Oh.
COVID, and we were doing these kind of what if kind of scenarios, and it was like an interactive kind of thing where they were like life size pinball game. It was like 8 foot tall. We did a air hockey thing that was 16 by 8 feet.
Wow.
And you could have 8 people play at the same time. Had all these things you had to go through and stuff. So, but we had a lot of what if scenarios where we had to do Raspberry Pi programming, and you couldn't do it with anything else.
Yeah.
So we would have to have a custom board done. But my point is, I like doing that end of it as far as that is. But what I was getting at was, if you're starting animatronics, this is a fun way to get advanced results without having to go through all that stuff. But yeah, if that's your thing, that's awesome, because you can do stuff that you can't do any other way.
Now, Chris has a question. I said, you're kind of into the Fright Prop stuff, but what are some of the other places to get the props and the other pieces to do some of this, animatronics and animations and stuff? What are some other companies out there?
You mean for controllers or for the mechanisms?
If Chris is the one doing the
Yeah,
the
he's the one
talking.
that's doing the parrot. He says
Oh
both,
yeah. Okay.
but Bob has mentioned Purgatory Props. But
Yep, they're good. I mentioned Hallucination Creations. they make a lot of those. Fry Props themselves have started doing some of the mechanisms themselves, which I don't know who they've got doing that, but there's lots of it. I used to do a lot of poison props at one point. All kinds of companies out there do all this stuff. A lot of them at the show. Probably see some, in a couple weeks at the East Coast Haunter Show. But there's all kinds of different companies you get there. Stuff. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to tell you how many there are. But I mean, I would just after you check them out. I mean, obviously the ones been probably doing it the longest commercially is Scare Factory, but I don't want to cast aspersions, but I wouldn't buy one of those. I've made a career out of repairing their stuff. I'll say that.
Is that
Someone asked,
what's that one company?
sorry,
Is it Gilderfluke? Is that what it is?
Gilderfluke is what Disney used for many, many, many years. And like the Hall of Presidents and stuff, a lot of stuff was done on Gilderfluke. And they're a very German company, been around a long time. Good customer support, not for the beginner. They use they're a controller, and they use a form of code, although they have some of the controllers which are push button, whatever. But they're a little more advanced with some of the stuff. They do servo controllers, they do piston controllers, stuff like that. Very high end. They're kind of expensive. They're good, so I'm not gonna say they're not. They are pretty good.
There's just a
But
different level of
they're a different
they're
level,
not
and
something your typical home haunter, yard haunter is going to use.
right. If someone gave you one, awesome. But to control it, to add it in. Good thing is, they like everything else, they take a standard trigger, so you can tie it into other things, as you go. And yeah, I will be at East Coast Haunters, and I have a booth there. I think it's 118, and I'll have the death whistles and fear fans and all that, Packer gloves and stuff for actors, all the fun stuff.
Right.
Well, that's yeah, I think that's most of the questions. Milton says he'll see you there.
Right.
Where Give us the rundown. Where can people find you? Where can people learn a little bit more about Ed Gannon and all that you do?
Boy, it's a big list. I'm easy to find. You can get me on Facebook. It's Ed Gannon. You can do somethingwickedproductions.com. I'm in Salem at chambersofterror.net. New walking tour, vampire ghostadventures.com, which is a cool new walking tour in Salem, and goes to parts of the town that other tours don't. So that's kind of cool. So I've been working on that for a while. Pretty much I'm easy to find. You can get my phone number online, whatever. You have a question or something, give me a call, send me an email. If I can help, I'll be happy to do so.
Chris throwing a plug in there for rcbvfx.com is his website. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Sweet.
And one more question for Matthew. What software would you recommend for beginners DMX control?
Ooh. Well, there's a bunch of stuff out there. Depending if you're doing lighting or you're doing effects.
FX, I think it's FX.
Yeah. So I mean, I personally, again, I go with the Fry Props Flex Max 2 because it's got all that stuff, and you can link up all different kinds of DMX devices. But I know there's was it Light Creative or something like that? I think Sony made one that you can, but it's mostly for lighting, and it likes their own things, and you have to get a special hub, and it's all Wi-Fi and
there
stuff
is
like
one
that.
out there called QLC Plus.
Right.
That is fairly easy. It runs on Linux, Mac, and Windows, and I think even Raspberry Pi.
No, I think you're right.
Had very much experience with it, but
I haven't used it yet, but I hear good things.
Yeah.
So again, I'm this is intro to animatronics. So I'm trying to think of like, if someone's looking at the stuff and they don't know what a piston or a valve is, and there's nothing wrong with that. I get it. Then trying to think of the easiest way to kind of get you into it, because like everything else, once you learn what these things are and what they do and how to connect them, all of a sudden the mystery of that is gone, and it makes it fun. And then you can like you were saying, you can get kind of creative with it, and it gives you ideas, and you think how you can make, basically I'm a big storyteller. I love to like tell a story in a haunt, and there's always room for the mishmash of different things like we used to do in the day. You go from an alien spaceship into a clown hallway to a Frankenstein lab. That's cool if that's what you want to do it. There's ways to tie that together into a story too. And then, but I like to tell a story no matter what that story is. And part of that is tying all these things together so that when the audience sees something, whether they see it or they miss it because they're looking at different places, it's there for their group to experience, and they can talk about it after, and they get that, kind of feeling. So for me, it's easiest way to get that storytelling tool into people's hands. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, because I remember very clearly not knowing what any of this stuff was or what it did. And again, now it's so much easier because there's so many more things that you can, not only that you can buy and use, and they work with each other. Back in the day, nothing worked with each other. You know what I mean? You had to I mean, you know what I'm saying? You had to figure some way to get these things to do what you wanted to do. Maybe they would be on different things completely, and just hopefully they work together. So, and now you can also go to places like this and, have someone actually show you and teach you how to do something. That wasn't the case back in the day. So my point is, if there's any way that anything I've said here tonight can help you and make things easier for you and make you understand it and not be afraid of it, because quite frankly, a lot of stuff is pretty simple. And I know you're saying, well, you know what you're doing, that's why it's simple. But I can tell you that, get your hands on a couple of these things, get a starter kit and start playing with it. And all of a sudden you'll like, this is pretty simple and it's a lot of fun. Hopefully
Yeah,
you can
it
have
lights
some
a
fun with it.
fire under your butt, and it's like, oh, you mean it was that easy?
I want to make a werewolf that tears somebody in half.
Well, that was a bit much, but yeah, there was.
Maybe
Yeah,
one
you
day.
had to use 2 or 3 things there instead of just
Yeah.
one, but
Yeah, never been one to do it by halves. So, yes,
Yeah.
someone's talking about the competition robotics community. Yeah, it is a lot easier to build those robots that tear each other apart now, and or drones or any of that stuff. You can modify them, and like they were saying, it's so much easier now than even 20 or 10 years ago. Like it's even easier than 5 years ago. So the way you can just go on now and get stuff that you normally couldn't get from China or other places, like those relays, those simple 12-volt relays. It used to be they were really hard to get, and now they're much easier. So
You
so
can buy
that's a
them in
good
bulk for $1.33 each if you get them from China.
true. Yeah. Still, even like third hand, they're still affordable. So
Yeah.
it's not bad. I'll take it.
Yep.
Well,
Ed,
Ed, thank you for being here tonight. We thank all of our guests. Yeah, you guys are awesome. We appreciate you. Thank you very much, both to our guests and especially to Ed, all of those that asked questions this evening. And Brian, you want to let people know where they can find this if they're not watching it live, or if they want to go back and take a look at it?
yes, if you are one of our Haunters Toolbox members, whether you're a Haunter or a ProHaunter or a Hauntmaster, you will get this in your email. If you're not a member, go ahead and go to HauntersToolbox.com tonight and sign up to be a member. That way, when I release the emails in a couple of days with this video in it, you'll get the email. You can also go to our Facebook page, Haunters Toolbox on Facebook. That's our group. And I will pin this video to the top of the page. You'll also get it at the Hauntmaster group. I will pin it to the top of the page. That way you guys have access to it.
I didn't know that was you with VFX. That's awesome. I like VFX. No, I had no idea.
Well, RCB VFX, is that the same VFX that you're thinking about?
I'm not sure.
We'll go check out Chris's website.
I'll go check it out now too.
Show.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Visual effects for a lot of films, and I used to do monsters and dead things, and now I do digital stuff primarily. Yeah, you'll see I've got movie special effects, theme park special effects, and motion graphics, and then there's one page that's just pictures of all the makeup things from the days.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna check that out.
Okay,
Now I feel
thanks.
stupid. I didn't know that.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. This was very educational and really interesting. So yeah.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We're going to shut her down. Appreciate you
Excellent.
guys attending. Thanks again,
Take
Ed.
care. Keep on scaring everyone.
Bye, guys.
Keep on scaring.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
This podcast episode sponsored by Scarlet Badges. Get your Scarlet Badges at scarebadges.com. Also sponsored by Haunters Toolbox. Take your haunt to the next level at haunterstoolbox.com. Thank you for listening to Haunt Topic Radio. Please leave a comment wherever you found this podcast. Each comment you leave will help spread the word to other haunters around the world. Next time.